It kind of feels like being in space, exposed to the sun. Very warm good afternoon. Any thoughts of having a sleepy afternoon after lunch has disappeared the moment the light has been shone. We have a very exciting topic to discuss, and the stage was already set by Somnath sir this morning when he showed us the graph of the exponential growth of space sector with nearly 1.5 trillion, 1,500 billion was what he projected by 2047 as the target of the space economy of our country. So I have here a wonderful set of panelists, an esteemed professor, somebody who was my student, a very close friend, and somebody who is a stalwart entrepreneur in the industry. So this would look like a very informal chit-chat, but I hope that's where the best ideas come from. So what we'll do is we'll take 2 minutes for everyone to introduce themselves and say what they're working on currently, and then I'll have a couple of questions in which we'll do rounds. Okay, and people can pitch in at any time. So we'll start with you, Satyanarayan sir, who is a living legend in this area.
So, yeah, my name is Satya Chakravarthy, Professor of Aerospace Engineering at IIT Madras. In the context of this particular panel, I'm a co-founder of Agnikul. I think that's something that a lot of people know, but you may not know that I'm also actually a co-founding advisor at Galaxy Space, which is a Earth observation satellite company. Yeah, that's about my quick. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, that announcement is over.
For those who missed it, right after the keynote talk by Somnath sir, Professor Chakravarthy announced that Agnikul will be beginning a center here in Trivandrum. So we would like to thank him for that and for coming to our city. Yes, Keyur.
Okay, I'm audible. So I'm Keyur, I'm from Dhruva Space. At Dhruva Space, what we do is we provide an end-to-end solution to establish assets in space. I think rather than talking about what we do, I would like to touch upon why we do it. Today, across the globe, we are looking at adoption of satellite technology-enabled data and products being of increasing importance. It will change the way we do a lot of the tasks and the way we lead our life. There is a necessity to ease access to space, and that comes from two main reasons. One, you don't want to have a separate place for looking at how to build a satellite overall, to get a launch, to get a dispenser, and a separate method to operate the satellite. You want to bring this all under one umbrella. That is done for the reason of bringing in efficiency of economics, and at the same time giving something modular. To give an example, earlier when you would think of a satellite phone or a satellite network, you would think of that same one antenna or one handheld phone that you would have to use for anything and everything. But today when you think of satellite-based IoT, satellite-based broadband, you start thinking about different end-user terminals. You start thinking about different types of satellites which are there. So today we are transitioning from building infrastructure and giving one size fits all to a tailored solution for everyone. And that should be the case also for the upstream segment, which is about establishing infrastructure in space. And that is what we focus on today.
Akash.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Akash, and I'm representing two companies here. One, KaleidEO, where I'm one of the co-founders and leading technology, and our parent company is Satsure. Satsure basically solves challenges on the ground using data from space. That is essentially what Satsure does, using Earth observation images. What you see is similar to what on Google Earth, what you get. You transform data and analytics from such images and solve challenges here for different industries. While at KaleidEO, we started developing technology to enable capturing that data. So we have built a scaled-down version of a high-resolution, wide swath imaging payload. And this was tested in April of this year. So together, Satsure plus KaleidEO, we are looking at a full-stack Earth observation starting from data generation to data processing and delivering solutions to the end customer.
Lloyd,
Hi, I'm Lloyd. I'm co-founder and CEO of Hex20. So our founding team, everyone is from Trivandrum. We studied in the same high school, and three of them did their engineering in CET Trivandrum. So kind of a local boy setup. And what we do is we build small satellites that takes different type of payloads to space. And currently we are in the process of finalizing our first satellite that will fly in February, March, which is called Nila after where our office is in Technopark in the Nila building. That's the gist.
so we have a variety of experts here. The only reason why I'm sitting here is because my educational background is in aerospace engineering. My BTech and PhD are in aerospace engineering. I don't do much in aerospace engineering now, except that I taught a couple of batches in IIST vehicle design. But it was during my undergrad term in IIT Bombay, 1999-2000, that the startup bug had come. Junjunwala sir and everybody were involved. We had a company called righthalf.com, which was registered. At that time, software startups were the norm. I mean, you could not think of aerospace department, anybody thinking about startup. And then it was Professor Chakravarthy and his team that actually initiated such a thought in IIT Madras. So he has seen the evolution of the ecosystem right from the inception of the ecosystem. So I'd like to hear from him. How does he feel about the ecosystem now? And last year, we had precisely the same type of panel. So what has the change been in the last couple of years that you have noticed?
Yeah, I think some of it was actually covered by Chairman ISRO in the morning during his keynote as well as during the roundtable. That I think many of us were there. I mean, not my journey as such. In fact, he didn't mention about what I have done at IIT Madras. But what I meant is how things have now become like so common that we have like all these startups and there is an exponential growth and so on. I think Dhruva Space actually, as a matter of fact, has been one of the pioneers in being like a deep tech, space tech startup long before anybody else came along. In my mind, I think when you now look at like a rocket startup, let's say, for example, I think we have a lot of satellite people. So if I have to talk a little bit about Galaxy, I will do. But largely, I will keep to myself the rocket side because that's not right, not around here. So I think the public imagination has been primarily captured by Elon Musk. That's what is pretty much the starting point. If you think about it, there are space agencies in different countries. India has been very in the forefront. All Indians celebrate all the successes that ISRO clocks. And similarly, there is NASA in the US itself. And then there are also lots of private space companies, launch vehicle companies in the US. It's not as if like privatization of space is something new in the US, right? But for whatever reason, I think Elon actually kind of sexed up the whole thing, right? I think maybe with his flamboyance or personal style or whatever it is. So that essentially is a moment where Indians started thinking, hey, it's possible for us to also think about making our own smaller versions of those rockets over here. And the government also actually started saying, yeah. So for example, when we started Agnikul, there was one particular moment, I actually was staring at a lawyer, asking her, is it okay to actually launch from India because there are no laws that allow it, or prevent it, right? So my argument with her was, there are no laws, so why would anybody stop me? So she gave me a very nice, kind smile and then said, Professor, the way the law operates in India is that if there is no law about it, first we will arrest you and then figure out, what to do. Okay, that was not a very good evening for me that day. Right? So that's where we started. But so kudos to Srinath, my co-founder, CEO at Agnikul. I came back from Delhi. He set up this meeting with her, and then when I was in Delhi, and then I came back. The next day, I called him and said, "Look, we might be doing something illegal, right?" And I mean, my problem is that I'm actually, the first thing is I'm an IIT professor. I have to actually cover myself there, right? So I don't want a blemish to my organization. So he said, no, I think things will turn around, don't worry about it, right? We will plod along. So my point essentially is that by the time we get to launch, it should become legal, okay? So until then, we have some time, right? So, and it surely it happened. I think it came actually out of the blue as well, right? Right into COVID in May of 2020, when the finance minister actually, announced a stimulus package for the country with going through COVID. She announced, liberalization of space sector, privatization of space sector, appointment of InSpace, and all of that stuff. It was actually completely, surprising, particularly in that moment. But what's more interesting, and in hindsight, it's not surprising that ISRO did what it did. Even before the Department of Space and the Prime Minister's office, any of those people actually tried to figure out how to structure InSpace. They took initiative to form a 10-member committee that will act on behalf of InSpace in Bangalore, and started looking at who all want to actually take what support from ISRO and so on. That proactiveness is something really stellar, in my opinion. They needn't have done it, because they could have said, yeah, we also actually heard it from the TV, right? We want things to happen by itself and so on. They could have done that, right? But they did not. As a matter of fact, I should probably, say this here. Even before all of these things, maybe about a year or so before all of that stuff happened, sometime in 2018, 2019 timeframe, one of the things that I did was to take my co-founders to VSSE director, who happened to be Somnath at that time. And there was absolutely no policy in ISRO to support any of this. In fact, one of the problems that a lot of people had at that time was ISRO was actually the judge, jury, and executor. Right? There is absolutely no way to contest whether ISRO is in the right of doing something or nothing of that sort. Right? So they were the ones who were setting the standards. They were the ones who would actually give the permission. Everything was with them. But Somnath was actually extremely progressive. The moment actually we landed up, he said, don't worry about it. As VSSC director, I will do what I can to support you. And he put us with his entity directors just that same morning, got into a meeting. Then we decided to actually go around different facilities to figure out what all we could use and so on. And then, of course, we had to get into an MOU. And that's where actually things get problematic, right? So then the MOU goes in, sits in some DOS office somewhere, and then we have to chase and all that stuff. And by then, InSpace happened. And then that MOU got subsumed into the InSpace MOU and all those things. But subsequently, I think InSpace has been set up in the Ahmedabad office, and they have been extremely proactive. They are extremely proud about what they are doing as well, and they are very supportive. In fact, I feel it's actually very tough to be in space because, okay, fine, for what it's worth, somebody from Agnikul would say, okay, we are part of IIT Madras. IIT Madras has some pedigree. It's, after all, a government organization. We are incubating. There is some legal structure to the whole thing that's pinned onto something with some institution, right? Some institution with some pedigree. But here we are, actually 1.4 billion people with so many young people, youngsters who are like saying, I fired a rocket in my backyard. I want to now actually go to InSpace. How will InSpace react to this? I have no idea.
Keyur, you have a legal perspective as well to think about. How has the evolution been?
Okay, so I'll actually talk about it in the legal perspective only, because I think the insights that have been shared by Professor Chakravarthy are incredibly amazing. I cannot add further to that. But there's one very interesting thing to note. InSpace office in Ahmedabad was inaugurated on 10th June 2022. On 30th June 2022, sorry, I hope I'm audible. Yeah, 8th June. And on 30th June 2022, The first 2 authorizations were already issued, and 2 startups, one of which was Dhruva Space, other was Digantra, was already launching payloads on POEM, which is the 4th stage of PSLV for launching missions. And I think the perspective also comes from being a company which was waiting to launch our first 2 satellites. The moment it's a satellite, there's much more involved. Safety scrutiny, which is the ODAR and SSA Proforma and things as such, getting spectrum coordination and much more. And from June to November, we were actually able to launch our first mission that had 2 satellites there. So today, as a lawyer, I'm very proud to say that the conventional understanding that one had to get legal permissions, you had to really struggle. You had to go to Delhi or Bangalore or to so many places. Very often it is incredibly difficult to deal with the government. That has gone. That has gone away. And today, as a lawyer or rather a regulatory professional, I'm very happy to say that the quality of work that you do has substantially changed. Now you focus on policies that are addressing questions like how do we grow the economy, how do we increase private participation, what do we do for increasing exports, what are the kind of standards needed to turn from indigenizing to innovation. And all of this happening in 2 years is unprecedented if we look at any other sector. And I think because that exists, that is why today we are also present in an event which is talking about building a hub in the state itself. And it is not a conversation which is reserved just for the central government and DOS. So I think this change is one of the major milestones that we should say we have achieved as an ecosystem, if we look at the positives.
Thank you so much for that. 30th June happens to be my birthday, so that's an unforgettable date for me as well. It's the time we saw the big change. Akash, you have a very unique perspective because you were a student when all this was happening, and then you graduated right into when Indian private space sector just was getting started. So how does it look around, almost a decade from then?
Well, I'm not that young, Arun, first of all. I graduated back in... I graduated back in 2013 from Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. So, I mean, I can say that from the age of 18, I've been in this thing of Department of Space, right? And after graduating, worked for ISRO with VSSC, in fact, here in Trivandrum, Valiamala, for 3 years. It was in 2016 that I went to do my master's. And that is when, around 2016, I think a lot of things were happening in India with ORF dialogue coming in, where Sanjay from Dhruva Space, Pradeep from Satsure, and a couple of others started talking a lot about how do we accelerate the space sector here, because Dhruva Space was founded back in 2012. It was actually registered in 2012 when there was no policy or anything. So even when Satsure was established, there was no policy about a private company dealing with remote sensing data analytics, and giving as a solution to other companies in India, which is why Satsure was headquartered outside when it was established. So over the last 3 years, like what Professor Satya mentioned, there's been a lot of changes in ease of doing business in space tech in India, which is why like now we are back in Bangalore. For me, I ventured into this private space ecosystem because when I went to do my master's, I was at University of Surrey, and Surrey had this, started building satellites using industrial components back in 90s, when even now, like people talk about, okay, let's use COTS components, right? That is where the kick of private space ecosystem in me started. And fortunately, when I got back, folks like Professor Satya, Pradeep, they have done enormous hard work in setting the foundation for us to come in and start KaleidEO now, where we are able to say build imaging payloads out of India and actually capture images of Earth, right? So that's our journey.
Thank you. Lloyd, you have a very unique perspective. You did not belong to the industry. You came to the industry in a very tangential fashion, and then you came to the industry very far away in Australia. So you have a very vantage point of looking at the Indian space ecosystem, especially the private one. what do you see? What?
Yeah, so I started my career as a software engineer. I did my computer science, and later with my friends, we started Hex20. So when we started, a lot of advice that we got was not to start in India because there was no rules and policies, and nobody had any clue what to do. Yeah. So all the suggestions that we got was, don't do it here, or do it as a different company. Don't call it space or defense. Then you will get into trouble. Yeah. So I was in Australia, and we started the company there in one of the space accelerator programs. And immediately after that, the space policies changed in India, which really helped us to come back and set things up here. And when we came, there were already many startups from the space industry. So it was easy for us to come here, set up things, or at least there were people to talk to who had already gone through the experience, and that really helped us to set things up here. And being from Trivandrum, we were it was really easy for us to go to talk to K-Space, KSUM, Technopark, because we knew them for quite some time, especially people from Technopark and KSUM, and they really helped us to set things up here and get us moving. And in Trivandrum, we set up our lab, and a lot of our integration and testing is happening here. And even with the ecosystem here in Trivandrum, what we found interesting was there is a lot of resources, like Somnath sir said, that was available in Trivandrum. We had IIST. We had so many students coming in to do internship with us, which was a good thing for us. And then the whole ecosystem here, including the engineering colleges, and especially founders are from Trivandrum CET. So it was easy to connect with a lot of people who are working in ISRO. So all these things helped. So being a latecomer actually helped us to establish things much faster. When I'm listening to the story of others who have started early, who had gone through a lot of loops to understand or to set things up, for me the journey was, or for our team, the journey was much easier because already people have laid some roads we could walk, and then the support from the local ecosystem. So that is my experience, starting Hex20 here in in India or in Trivandrum.
It's today when you talk about how there was only one space startup a few years ago, and now we have 250 plus, then that number 250 plus looks like a big number. But if you look at the Indian startup ecosystem with almost 100,000 startups, 4,500 here in Kerala alone with KESAP, then it's a very small number compared to the vastness of this sector. So Satya sir, why should more startup founders think about starting up in space? And then when they do think, what are the challenges that still exist in the ecosystem that they should keep in mind?
Yeah, so I've said this actually quite a few times, and I would say this again. See, startups are all about solving problems. It's not about technology as such. Technology is a context for us to solve a problem. So we have to find out what problem exists and can we solve that problem. Who cares about this problem, whose problem it is, and what kind of paying that they can do, and will the technology be cheap enough for the paying customer to afford it, or is it possible for us to actually develop the technology to make it affordable? So this is the broad canvas of how to start a startup. It's not right, and we have to now see space tech in that lens. what I find is that a lot of people who actually go through aerospace engineering or avionics or any of these things that are related to space, and for the fascination that they have for space, they decide that they want to actually do a space tech startup. Okay, and then they are in search of what problem to solve, and so on. And that could be kind of like having a hammer and looking at things as nails. I don't know we should really bother about numbers as such, but there is some merit in the numbers game, because it ultimately at the end of it is a pyramid. And larger the base, the better it is, the taller the pyramid can get, and so on. What you will find is that over time, as the sector matures, you will find consolidation happening, people falling off the way, mergers and acquisitions, those kinds of things will continue to happen. And you will find some marquee guys who are able to hold forth in what they are doing. And there are other people who are actually like also rans and so on. So this is something that will always happen anywhere in this. And space tech is also not an exception again. What I would like to call for is, see, when we now say space, we are taking only satellite guys and maybe an oddball rocket guy and making them sit in a panel and stuff. That's actually not what actually space tech is all about. Space tech is all about applications, right? So it's one thing to be able to launch a rocket, another thing to be able to launch a satellite in the rocket, and then there is a third thing to be able to actually craft a payload that can get into that satellite and stuff. But finally, what is that payload supposed to deliver, right? What is the data that we are going to get out of it? Is it communications, or is it Earth observation, or anything else? And that is actually a much, much, much bigger field when compared to launching or the upstream segments or the midstream segments. So my thinking is that even if you're saying, okay, Kerala actually has VSSE, but we need to improve the space tech quotient of our startup ecosystem and so on, or anybody else. It could be Gujarat, it could be Andhra Pradesh, whoever, whichever states. I think as he pointed out, state by state, they are now beginning to target this sector as an emerging one. My point is, focus on applications, focus on the downstream. If you look at the space tech economy, the downstream economy is much, much, much larger when compared to the upstream economy, right? So is there a way by which we can enthuse startups, youngsters to come up and do a lot of image processing, deep learning, edge computing, those kinds of things that are a lot easier to do, right? And then you can actually move the needle much faster, get to revenues, the market, and all of that stuff much sooner. There is absolutely no glory in saying that I want to actually do the greatest rocket and go to space and do like jump from one orbit to another, all kinds of things. There are startups that are actually saying they would do all that. And I'll just, if I can spend a little bit, one more minute on that, I'll come back to it. But startups should actually be focusing on trying to go get revenues as quickly as possible. That's when they will be able to prime investor interest, VC interest, and all of that stuff. So you need to have a lot of those startups so that the one oddball Agnikul can also actually get some investment. Right? So because people will actually ask the question, okay, fine, if we go to get the data, where is the data coming from? Then this guy will say, oh, satellites are there. Who are making the satellites? Okay, these guys. Who are launching the satellites? So then it kind of comes down to like one or two guys who can do these things. But the meat of the matter is actually with the applications. I think we need to promote that a lot more, and that awareness is important. So what happens instead is, let's say there are like some 2 launch vehicle companies in the country, right? And then there are some 4 satellite companies in the country. I'm just throwing some numbers could be a bit more than that, right? Who have got to some level of success, visibility, fundraise, progress, whatever that you want to call. What is happening is, let's say somebody actually also wants to do a rocket, or somebody wants to craft a satellite. They go to an investor, right? That investor will ask, what is your differentiation, right? How are you different from those guys? They are already in the race. They have a first mover advantage, right? Right? So this guy, so I have personally had so many people come up to me for advice, saying that I will actually make a Raptor engine and then sell it to Agnikul. I'm like, have you talked to Agnikul? right? So if you have a customer, right? So if you have a customer in mind, you have to actually first go talk to the customer before you actually think of making one. There is another person, my own student, right? I actually refused to advise him, actually, as a matter of fact. So he is now crafting something where he will actually take a satellite from one orbit and put it in another orbit, right? So someone else actually is wanting to set up like a city in space and all of that stuff, right? Now, depending upon your pedigree and all of those things, you may get given a seed funding. But if you are not able to, and then that could actually kind of be intoxicating, and you actually get started on it. And you know, in deep tech, one of the problems is that investor money could actually be thought of as success. Right, so fundraise itself is like success. Like investor is your customer. All these things are like a huge misnomer, right? You're mistaking, you know, activity for accomplishment, right? So there are a lot of guys who actually get trapped by all of these things. So we have to sensitize this, saying, look, boss, space tech is actually all about applications. Just focus on that as much as possible. Don't worry about. You don't have to necessarily do hardware to look cool, right, or brainy. Right, there is like so much that you can do otherwise, right? That's the message that I would give in a, very elaborate way.
Yes.
I think it was really refreshing to hear Professor Chakravarthy, because this is an approach that I think is something very new to space. If we look at space classically, it's 50, 60 large companies. Let's talk about 10 years before, like a decade back. It's 50, 60 large companies. These rely largely on government contracts, on defense contracts, on the notion that there's a space race that is continuously going on, and a particular nation or a set of nations have to maintain space supremacy. And this point was actually the reason for existence, the reason for growth, and also the single point of sustenance for these enterprises. And today we've come to a point where we are talking about the economy changing from these 50, 60 large companies to so many smaller enterprises who are generating value. But now the question comes, how many of these enterprises will survive, right? This question comes not just because technology may fail, the technology is suitable, but the technology may or may not be usable or may not find that utility like space tech did earlier. To give an example, earlier if someone made something novel for a power system of a satellite, that system would definitely be used for the next 20, 25 years with upgrades. Today, even if I'm confident that if I manage to make a solar cell in India today, 3 years later, there'll be someone who would have improved upon it, made something better. But this also presents with an opportunity. The opportunity is the moment this economy became fragmented and this fragmented economy continued to exist, it opened up scope for someone to not be a large enterprise, to not have a large pool of money and still build technology which is meaningful. So yes, I think the message is there should be more startups, because space is not just today about catering to government contracts. The economy is changing. It is not going to be government infusing money to keep startups alive. It is also about finding viable commercial use cases, viable global markets, and that presents with a whole set of new opportunities. But the challenge it comes with is there is very little to learn from the lessons of the past. It will truly be a new market and a new methodology of being sustainable in business that one would be looking at. So apart from being technology heavy, it will also become a commercially challenging domain. So people are welcome to make more space tech startups, and we do look forward to seeing more and more of startups coming along. But yes, you'll have to share the challenges as well.
Thank you. Akash, from Satsure to KaleidEO, you have the change, right? When you set up one company and then when you set up the other company. So what are the lessons that you have?
So just to carry on the conversation and also to answer, I'll come to the answer later. We are, at least on this panel, we are very close to the users. One particular anecdote that I just want to mention here is in 2022, Satsure established first office, like our own office, after working in co-working space for like almost 5 years in Bangalore. And we invited Somnath sir and a couple of other dignitaries from headquarters. And on the other side, we also had our customers who were from banks like HDFC, Kotak Mahindra or ICICI. So during the inauguration, on the same table, ISRO, like, folks were wondering what the hell these guys are doing. Like, why is bank guy sitting here? And the bank guys were wondering, like, how is Somnath sir, like, coming here? Like, I mean, what is Satsure doing that, like, such a high, I would say, high-profile leader is coming to inaugurate the office, right? And I think the more we find use cases that actually impact day-to-day lives, which has happened in, say, communication sector. So everyone watches television, everyone reads news, like now the internet. So the SATCOM industry has taken off. Like, so if you see the entire space sector, they call it as multi-billion-dollar economy. More than 70 or 80% is by SATCOM, okay? And the rest, you talk a small share of Earth observation, and then you have upstream ecosystem. So the more we are grounded, even though we are like a space tech companies, the more we are grounded and close to the users to deliver value, that is when the business comes to the downstream companies and the value goes up the chain, okay? And that was the story of Satsure as well. So I came into Satsure, like, when Satsure was already, 3 years after establishing. And already there was like a product market fit where we have customers. And it was about, okay, like, how do we generate data now that is useful to Satsure, okay? So that is where KaleidEO started. So my whole first year was about sitting down with Satsure, understanding, okay, like, if you take a satellite image, the number of pixels, the size of the pixels, like, what is the bit width of the pixels, like, the number of channels that you want to see. Do you need a hyperspectral, okay, like, or do you need a multispectral? So based on that, we started the KaleidEO. So I think, coming back to what Professor Satya said, that is very important for anyone who is looking to start in any space tech. Please look, understand what is the user or who is your user, and then start building the technology around it. Don't start the other way around unless the technology is so emerging, something like what Raptor engine did with Falcon 1 in 2006, where there was unlimited flow of capital and the technology is completely revolutionary. Yes, go for it. But if the technology is not revolutionary, focus on the user, understand the market, and then get to it.
Lloyd, you also have the advantage of seeing the ecosystem in other countries as well. So what are the challenges, and why should more people think about India?
I think the key point Professor has already pointed out, without any proper use case, don't get into a startup. Yeah. The main thing that I see in the market is some people come with idea and then they're waiting for a grant so that they can do something. Or they come up with an idea and they're looking for looking for funding so that they can do things. And what's important these days is to show traction. Otherwise, none of the investors are interested. They want to see, feel, touch things that you do, and which is very important. I think like 10, 15 years back, you could have raised millions of dollars with just one PPT presentation. If it looked good or the idea is good, you could have made some money. And just for doing space, don't start a startup, because at one side that is also hurting the existing startups or really nice startups who are trying to come up. And in the market, this is a very small market. Like Arun said, there are so many IT startups, and it's just 200 plus, space tech startup. And when someone does something, bad, that is going to affect all these 200 companies. Yeah. And that is what is happening in the market, or when you look at all the other markets internationally, that is what is happening. So just because you have an idea, that doesn't mean, it is going to work. Because like Professor said, there should be some user, some use case, some taker for what you're doing. So unless and otherwise you have that, just going and, starting a startup and, assuming that you're going to get funding, you're going to get some grants, and that's not going to work.
I'll start the last round with you. Levin sir is here, Sanjeev sir is here. and we are trying to set up the K-Space and the Defense Innovation Hub. So having seen various incubation ecosystems and having seen the evolution of our own ecosystems in different parts of the country, what are the few things that you can tell them, pointers about how we want the evolution of these two new zones to be?
See, even though they are sitting in two different chairs, the line between defense and space is like so thin, nobody can even see. Yeah, so always space and defense was hand in hand. Yeah, that is why, we had to have a lot of these policies to get space out of the ecosystem, and then startups can come and do things. A lot of things that we do for space, on the commercial side is very close to defense side. So like I said, the line is very thin. So it is nice that defense and space is joining hands together to promote the space startup ecosystem here, which will really help identify more opportunities in the defense side of things. And I think that's a great move.
So,
How should K-Space be?
well, I think I've given some thoughts already during one of the roundtable that we had just before lunch. Considering that, you have a good ecosystem of the upstream sector around Trivandrum here. Naturally, everyone thinks about, let's build, be it an engine or valves or satellites or whatnot, right? But coming back to the earlier thought, the lower hanging fruit, less capex intensive, is application software. So when you think about space, please just don't think about rockets or satellites that you see actually on TV. Try to talk to people, be it in social sector or be it in the urban governance, understand their challenges, and try to check again, what are those list of challenges, how many of those challenges can be solved using space tech. And of course, all challenges will not be solved using space tech. Like for our own product, only out of 25 parameters, we have some product called Farm Score, where we give a credit score to a land, and that is based off around 25 parameters. Out of 25 parameters, it's only some 6 or 7 parameters are derived from data from space. The rest are financial data, the bank data, the land ownership data, all those things come in, right? So you have to think about what are the key things that you can take out from any space tech, fit and pull in other data from ancillary industries, combine them, make it useful, and then solve the challenges of the people here. So for any K-Space or the ecosystem here, my advice would be if someone is coming up to saying that, we want to start a startup in space tech, please ask, why? Why do you want to start? And what are you solving? That's the only thing.
So,
Yeah, I think so. I have been associated with Kerala Startup Mission for quite some time. And it almost seems like I'm a go-to person for lots of events that they could call me, and I have some liking for Kerala. I don't know, it may be some previous birth kind of thing. I don't know specifically. I mean, we are, of course, in the southern part of India. It's not very surprising as such, but this is a great place to be in. And as he mentioned, you have ESSC and you have LPSC, and that has spawned a lot of manufacturing ecosystem around here as well. So, I mean, this morning in the roundtable, I think Dr. Somnath started by actually pointing out about academic involvement, and he used me as an example. And then somebody else was, I think Deepu was asking me, how can we go about this? I said, just pick up from what he said, right? So just go find the next Satya Chakravarthy and, figure out. But Somnath was saying, CET is actually not so, forthcoming. But if it's possible for you to actually get it done from IIST, you have 2 or 3, institutes. And the thing about Kerala is, I think somebody mentioned this in the morning as well. We don't want a Bangalore here, right? In fact, I was looking at, so for my own, air taxis, I look at cities. And Kochi is actually the largest city in Kerala, and it's probably the 75th largest city in the country, which is something that we have to understand what Kerala is all about. Kerala is actually one continuous urban, conglomerate, right? There is nothing called rural or urban out here, right? So that means that you don't have to worry about like a Trivandrum or a CET or IIST. You could actually go to a CUSAT, you could go to a bunch of other institutions. And I know, for example, I myself am actually working with Kerala Startup Mission on spawning startups in multiple different institutions in Kerala, right? So that kind of, and Malayalis actually have been entrepreneurs for a very long time, except that they probably succeeded in the Gulf more than here or something of the sort. So we have to actually figure out what are the ingredients that can be put together that will nucleate, this kind of thing. The second thing that I would like to say is, I don't know how many of you actually really understand this. Space is actually part of our, whatever mythological stuff, like what they say, Prithvi, Akash, and all that stuff, right? Antariksh. Antariksh is everywhere, right? Like there is like a lot of space within the body. The other day I was asking, okay, I know like where is kidney, where is my liver and all. What is in between the two, right? There is space. So there is like, there is space everywhere. So today, for example, if I were to actually look at Earth observation, it starts with drone imaging, right? And then we actually have something called HAPS. And then we go to satellites. There is imaging that you can actually do at multiple different levels. And is it possible for us to get images of multiple different resolutions, but with different swaths and stitch them together and so on? So you should actually encourage all kinds of startups that are even remotely related to space. It doesn't have to be actually something to do with out there and all that stuff. And second thing is obvious. I think I don't have to even say this, but let me just say it. You don't have to worry about whether it is actually a Malayali who is starting startup and all that stuff, right? Anybody who wants to start up, just let him in. And that's what I did when I started at IIT Madras, right? So I had no idea who Srinath and Moin were when they walked up to me and said that they wanted to start a company, right? So so we don't really look at who you are, what you are. If you want to do something, our job is to enable you, right? And then the only thing that you want to promise is, if you come and set up your shop here, it'll work well for both of us. So please do that. And once they come in here, then they are part of you, right? That's the way I would look at it. Yeah.
That's actually a very loaded question. I think it's always a tough challenge when you look at building an ecosystem locally, right? Especially when it is a capital-intensive ecosystem where everyone is looking at put in investments and grants for infrastructure to giving incentives and subsidies. But from the elementary learning that I've had from being in space tech so far, I think what has worked really well, or perhaps this could be one of the first examples to make it work very well, is the government itself looking at how it can implement space technology products in the most basic ways possible and incentivize the existing local industry to be a part of it. Downstream could be something that would initiate it very quickly, because naturally when we look at upstream to scale the presence of centers like VSSC, LPSC, or even leverage the presence of IIST, that is a much longer exercise where even enterprises looking to come would look at a fully made up ecosystem. Today we look at Bangalore, Hyderabad and emerging being Ahmedabad as emerging centers because there's a very rich vendor ecosystem that supports technologies which are relatively easy to build in upstream. With presence of VSSC and LPSC and even places like IISU in the region, the technologies which are being built are inherently so critical that a startup may not really work in that domain from the start. And even if they do, without having a centralized mechanism to support their establishment and advancement, they may not be able to look at it. But I think a good initiation could be for the government to perhaps look at how space tech enterprises can help them and leverage that to bring more and more enterprises into Kerala that will have a domino effect on building an ecosystem. Thank
Thank you, Keyur. They brought in water bottles, so I believe we are running out of time. That was a reminder of maybe we need some water to finish. One of the things that Somnath sir was talking about the difficulty of getting CET to play along with the change. But we also have LBS Institute of Women here, which launched a women's satellite, VSAT. So Dr. Lizzie Abraham's program is an example for all of us about how to take 4 different batches of girls through the process, work very closely with ISRO, and then actually get something launched by ISRO. And for me, always the contrast is when you go to the Inertial Systems Unit in Vattiurkav, right across the road is the Central Polytechnic Institute. And CPT is actually older than ISRO. And if you imagine the heights to which ISRO has gone and where CPT stands, it's almost where it began. So it's possible that we might have to build that flyover which will connect directly ISRO levels of aspirations and quality to be given to the students directly, bypass the systems we cannot change, which is the education system in general. Because, he said, go look for the next Satya in Kerala, but that I think will be a 5-year project and all of us will be removed from our position by the time we find a Satya. And then that Satya will have to go through the process again. So I think we have a lot of potential now to use the power of networking, and this was a classic example of that. People from different domains, different geographies coming together, different backgrounds coming together. So if there are any questions for the panelists, we have 5 minutes to address.
Satya sir was highlighting about application. We need to really focus because I want to tell the example of ISRO. We have developed the Navik. The space segment was there. We could really do that. But in order to develop the ground GPS type of software, nobody was there. Even though we were telling that Trivandrum is very good, we have a technopark, etc., we failed miserably in developing a ground-based software. So we need to focus. It's not alone like, competing with ISRO, trying to have an engine development or other thing. So you have to bridge the gap. The technology should be focused towards that.
As an extension to this example, I actually wanted to share a small example from within Dhruva Space. The first 2 satellites that we launched were actually amateur communication satellites. We did that because we wanted to showcase to the world that satellites built in India and the subsystems built by us worked. But there's a background as to how amateur ecosystem became involved. The founder, Sanjay, and a lot of our key team, which works on the ground segment, on building satellite communication systems, even the ones who worked on data handling schemes and encryption schemes, all happen to be hobbyists for amateur communication. And there are amateur radio clubs where anyone above the age of 12 can give an exam and have their own setup, test novel communication systems. And that is where it started from. And by the time we were into the mission, it resulted into a thing where these hobbyists, along with their, of course, professional training in space on the job, built a module that was built in partnership with Qualcomm to work on both terrestrial and satellite networks. So that is the power of sort of leveraging hobby-based activities as well at times. So I just wanted to share that anecdote.
I think while you were saying that, I just thought of ending with one question to everyone. Considering that we have VSSC, LPSC or ISU, the good ecosystem here, how many of the students or how many of your kids would you want them to work in a job in LPSC or start their own company, right? Like, so how do you bring up that mindset of not just thinking about, okay, like let me go and join this well-established organization, rather pursue my own idea to solve a problem. So I think that is something which we need to ask ourselves, how do we change that mindset around?
Mindset change is a whole different ball game, but I think slowly things are happening. The Chandrayaan 3, almost every school in Trivandrum had the live telecast going on. That totally all over the nation, the kind of jubilance that it brought up, that probably has inspired a lot of us. Early this year, in February, I was in OT and I had the chance to meet Rakesh Sharma. And I remember I had met him when we had a felicitation given in Trivandrum to him and Ashok Malhotra. So, and that I remember as one of the points which inspired me to look at aerospace as a potential field. So it's possible, as a child to get fascinated by a field. And now all of us have the opportunity to set an ecosystem that will make sure that our country is right on top and has at least 20-25% of the space economy of the world. So with that thought, I would like to thank all my panelists for spending the valuable time here. I hope we had a productive discussion. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the team, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude for such an enlightening session. We would like to present you with a token of appreciation. I would like to invite G. Levin, CEO of K-Space. I would like to invite Professor Satyanarayanan for receiving the token of appreciation. Lloyd. I would like to invite Lloyd Jacob for receiving the token of appreciation. Next, I would like to invite Keyur Gandhi for receiving the Akash Yalagach first. And I would like to invite our moderator for receiving the token of appreciation. Photo.